Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today will be a little bit of a different show. Recently, I was interviewed by Nick Capozzi. Nick is a sales pitch consultant. He spent lots of years working in broadcast and media, working on cruise ships, doing private consulting with respect to helping companies pitch their products. He recently sat down with me and had a series of questions that he wanted to ask me about networking. They were produced into videos that Nick's company produced. And as a part of that, I got the audio files and I figured it would be great to share them here on the podcast. So sit back and listen to me answer some questions from Nick Capozzi.
Today we're talking to networking thought leader Frank Agan from AmSpirit, that's amspirit.com, about how to work a networking event. I am very excited to have a conversation today with Frank Agan, the founder of AmSpirit, and we're talking networking events. Frank, what's the biggest mistake people make at networking events?
You know, Nick, there's a lot of mistakes you can make at a networking event, but the biggest mistake is simply not showing up. There's so much to be said for 90% of success is showing up. And so just being there, if you don't go, that's your biggest mistake.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to jump into this. So that's going to tie into another question that I have. Most people I talk to feel like walking into a networking event creates nervous energy for them. Is this natural?
You know, here's my great admission, one of my many great admissions. But when I go to networking events, I am nervous. And I'm supposed to be Mr. Network. I teach, I talk, I've written books on this stuff. And when I go to networking events, I find that little voice in my head saying, stay away, stay away. So I've come to the conclusion it's perfectly natural. And if you stop and think about it, our ancestors grew up in a time where we lived in tribes or clans of 150 people. And we seldom saw anybody but those 150 people. And if we saw a stranger, it wasn't good. So we're really hardwired to have an aversion towards strangers. It's natural. The problem is that, well, networking events are full of strangers. So you're going to have that aversion.
So I never thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. I like the tie in there with the history. I like that. So let's say I'm coming to a networking event. I'm literally walking up to the door. I'm about to put my hand on the door handle. What mindset should I be in at that exact moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, what I tell people that the mindset that they need to have going into events is really be focused on how you can help other people. You know, who are you going to meet? You know, who do you know that you can help by being there? Who might help you by being there? You know, who you can introduce, just kind of go through in your head. Okay, I'm here to help people, and kind of roll through it in your head. And what that does is two things. One, it engages the neocortex in your brain. The fear we feel, that aversion is very primal, right? It's something that most animals feel. And so it's very primal. It's the quick part of our brain. It's just kind of a natural part of our brain. But the neocortex is it's a newer part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that controls speaking. It allows us to set this whole elaborate situation up. And when we engage that neocortex, it naturally calms the primal part of the brain. So that's the first thing having those thoughts about helping other people does. The other thing that it does is it tends to build our confidence. I call it the cloak of invincibility, not invisibility, invincibility. It's the cloak of invincibility. And what that does is it gives us confidence, because if you stop and think about it, you're walking into a room of strangers. Who doesn't want you there if you're there to help everybody? If you're there to help people, all these strangers want you there. And so that gives you confidence that I'm coming in this room and I'm going to help. And so it just makes it that much easier to have that mindset walking into the room.
You know, I'm a career networker. I'm learning a lot already, so this is fantastic. Okay, so now I'm in the room. There's maybe dozens and dozens of people there. Who should I be connecting with?
You know, it really doesn't matter. I don't, unless I'm going somewhere to specifically meet with somebody, I don't have an agenda as to who I want to meet. And I seldom go somewhere saying, okay, you know, Nick, you and I are going to meet. If that was the case, we would meet for coffee elsewhere. So I'm walking into the room and I don't really have any preconceived notion as to who I'm going to connect with.
Okay, that seems inefficient, but I'm sure there's a strategic reasoning behind that.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily strategic, but I'm of the mind that every contact has opportunity. I mean, you're a sales guy. Your opportunities come from all sorts of sources, all sorts of different directions, and no two are really the same. There might be some patterns there, but generally speaking, they're coming from all different angles. And be that as it is, you can't really predict. So why go into a networking event and try and size people up and say, well, you're going to be a good fit. You're not going to be you're going to be a good fit. The reality is every contact has opportunity, and not everybody's going to be your next best strategic partner, your next best client, your next employer, but everybody's connected to somebody who could be. So your best is to get into a conversation with somebody and see where it goes. And then that one connection will lead to the next and then the next.
Okay, that makes sense. So give me some practical advice or tips for actually making contact.
Well, you know, there are really a number of things. The first thing you want to do is when you go to the networking event, you want to appropriately situate yourself. If you're going to stand up against the wall and be the wallflower, nothing's going to happen. But you have to kind of have that fisherman's mindset. And what I mean by that is you go where the fish are, or you go where the fish will be, by the coffee, by the bar. I have a friend who'll stand by the door, you know, where people are kind of funneling through. And that's a great place to interact with people. And that's just kind of bringing people by you. The second thing that I talk about once you're appropriately situated is you're going to want to initiate contact. And I'll tell you this, I'll tell everybody listening, initiating contact is 100% your responsibility. It's 100% your responsibility. You cannot expect somebody to come up to you and hope that it's going to be fruitful. It is on you. You got to make it happen. So what I always tell people to do is I always tell people three things. One, make eye contact. Don't be looking down at your shoes. Make eye contact with people. The second thing is smile, because when you smile, what ends up happening is, yeah, there you go. When you smile, the other person, they're called mirror neurons in our brain, and they mirror what we do. If you're ever meeting with somebody and they cross your arms, or they cross their arms, you might cross yours. You know, we're mimicking one another. It's kind of these primal things in our brain. So when we smile, people will smile back. So that's the second thing. The third thing I advise people to do is say hello, to say hello and just see what comes of that. And I know that can be unnatural. What I recommend to people to practice is just go to the store, go to the mall, wherever you can kind of walk amongst people and do that. Make eye contact, smile at people, and say hello, and see what comes of it.
You know, in a great way, I mean, one of the things I always coach people on is how to find some more natural internal charisma. And exactly to those points, making eye contact, smiling. And a great way to do that is, you just brought up the mall. Just open the door and hold the door open for someone. That's a great way to start getting that kind of process going. Frank, I got a question for you, though. This is incredibly interesting so far, and I'm learning a lot. But if I really wanted to be an incredible networker, I understand that joining a chapter of AmSpirit would be a great way to start, but what else you got for me?
Well, and this is key. This whole conversation is key because networking is vital to success. And if you're a professional, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, and you're responsible for driving a bottom line, driving sales, driving revenues, referrals are key. Referrals are it's the most effective way to generate business. And it always has been. But I always ask people this. If you had a choice, would you rather be the renter or the landlord?
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. You want to be the guy owning the building. You want to be the guy collecting the rents. So why would you want to just be in a networking organization when you could own a networking organization like AmSpirit?
Okay,
Makes,
tell me how.
Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah. We're engaged in our national expansion, and we're working across the country to find highly engaged individuals who don't just want to be in a networking group. They want to make money owning a networking group. And really what that ends up doing is they'll make more money from professional connections and also make money by building professional connections. If somebody's interested, they should reach out to me. I'd be happy to kind of give them all the details.
How do they get in touch with you, Frank?
They can reach me through the AmSpirit website, AmSpirit.com,
Okay.
or my email, which is frankagan@amspirit.com.
All right, and that's Frank Agin, A-G-I-N, at amspirit.com. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'd love some tips, Frank, on actually opening up conversations. So what's a great starting place to open up a conversation when I'm in these networking events?
Yeah, to dial back a second here, you're saying hello to people, and some people are going to say hello and it'll go nowhere. And some will say hello and you'll just know they're ripe for a conversation, and you have a conversation with them. What I don't encourage is starting that conversation with business. Who's your financial advisor? That will kill it faster than fast. Just put some sort of conversation about, hey, not what your zodiac sign, but hey, is this your first time at this event? What are events going on in town? Hey, I really like that tie or that lapel pin, or whatever it might be, and engage in some small talk. You just kind of go back and forth with respect to some small talk, and then you would slowly, at the appropriate time, you kind of go over to what I call light business. Again, it's not, hey, who's your financial advisor, but just talking about business in general, what they do. And then before you wrap it up, you're going to kind of want to return to small talk. Let me give you an example. And this happened to me a couple of years ago. Got to a networking event, got into a conversation with somebody, and it happened to be really snowing out. And I just remarked to the person, I said, "Oh my gosh, can you believe this snow?" And what she responded to me was, "Oh, I love the snow. I'm an avid skier. This is going to kind of build up the base for skiing, blah, blah, blah." She kind of went off on a little 30-second rant about she loves the snow. And so that allowed me to kind of have more of a conversation. Well, where are you from? When did you get into skiing? So on and so forth. Where have you skied? And then that allowed me at one point, when skiing had kind of run its course, to say, well, skiing is an expensive sport. What do you do to pay for skiing? And then that just kind of launched into what she did. And so we had a little polite conversation about that. When I have these conversations, and I advise people all the time, don't drive people towards an agenda. Just have a conversation with them. I just let her talk about her business. And then before we were wrapping up, I kind of returned back to small talk. And I said, hey, I'd really love to have a conversation with you sometime. If you don't get hurt between now and next week, maybe we could get hurt on the ski slopes. Maybe we could have coffee. So what that did was it signaled to her I was listening.
Right.
I tied that all together. But the key also is you need to listen. And so when she's talking, I'm not checking my phone. I'm not looking over her shoulder at somebody else. I'm not thinking about, okay, where I'm going to steer this. I'm listening to what she has to say. I'm shaking my head saying, okay, summarizing, echoing things back. Oh, so you like the longer runs, or you don't like the really, you don't like the real difficult, but you like the bunny slopes, or whatever it might be. But I'm listening to her, and then I might fire other questions back at her, and just kind of getting her kind of talking about things.
Well, listen, people buy from people they like, but people also want to network with people they like. So I get that strategy. Let me ask you a couple follow-up questions to that, Frank. One, how can I politely exit a conversation when I'm ready to? And then second to that, how many people should I be targeting to have a conversation like this at one particular event?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really kind of leads into your initial question. What's the biggest mistake people make? Not showing is the biggest mistake. The second biggest mistake is finding that great person to talk to and just hanging on to them. They're like a life jacket out in the open ocean, right? And so you don't want to just get stuck in a conversation or get caught up in one great conversation. And it's easy to do because it's okay. I was nervous coming here. I found somebody who's interesting to talk to. I just want to stay. But that's not good. So let me answer your first question. When I'm at an event that's a couple hours long, and I advise other people with respect to this, when I'm at an event that's a couple hours long, it might be 3 or 4 people that I talk to. I might talk to people that I already know, but 3 or 4 new people for sure. I'm not trying to find 12 people to, get all my business cards out to. I want to have a decent conversation with somebody. So let's go back to my example with the woman who skied. I'm having a conversation with her. We're talking business, and I might say, 20, 30 minutes into it, I don't want to get I want to know more about her. I want to, see who she knows, but I don't want to do it all here. Want to tell her about my business. Don't necessarily want to do it there. But what I might say is, hey, between now and, next week, assuming you don't get hurt on the ski slopes, I would like to have a cup of coffee with you, but there's 2 other people over there that I promised I would get with. Or I promised myself today I would have a conversation with 3 people. You're number 1. I need to find 2 other people. Or who are you here to meet? Who else would you like to meet? I come to this event all the time. I know lots of people, and then introduce her to somebody. And that allows her to meet somebody and allows me then to move on to somebody else. But it's key not to get stuck in that one conversation.
I love it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so once the event is over, what guidelines do you have for following up? What's the etiquette?
It certainly depends on the conversation. Some people, the conversation is so quick that I guess what I want to say is I don't want anybody to think that these are rock solid guidelines. Some people I might not follow up with at all because I haven't had a big enough conversation with them. But if I get somebody's business card and it's got an address on it, I'm going to write them a handwritten note. If I have somebody's business card, and
you're going to write them a handwritten note, Frank?
Yeah, we're only talking maybe 3 or 4 people tops, so it's not a lot. I'll leave the event, I'll get in my car, I'll drive a half mile down the road, get a Coke, and sit there and scribble out, hey, it was great talking to you. Have fun on the slopes. Something. I'll pop it in the mail. What's that cost me? Maybe $1, including the stamp. It's not a lot of money, but that a lot of people don't do that, and so that really elevates you in the minds of people. But a lot of people don't have offices and don't want to put addresses. So I will certainly get on LinkedIn, and I don't connect with them right away. What I will do on LinkedIn is I will just kind of look at their profile. Was there something that didn't come up? For example, there was somebody I was at an event with, went to look at their profile and realized, oh my gosh, they grew up right near where I grew up. So that's something else I can bring into the conversation. But I'll follow up with people. Certainly at the event, I'll say, hey, we should maybe we should get together, have coffee. A lot of it depends on what's promised. If I say, hey, listen, there's this great guy, Nick, I want to introduce you to. Well, I want to follow through on that. If nothing like that is promised, then it just might be just a quick email just saying, hey, if I can ever help you, or a lot of times what I'll suggest things as opposed to, hey, I'll help you any way possible. That kind of puts the onus on them and it makes it difficult. But if I say, hey, Nick, I know you're trying to meet people in the media. Would an introduction to this person help you? And that would be part of the follow-up.
Interesting. And I know in our discussions, you and I have had a lot of discussions about LinkedIn in particular, and I think we have different ways, or at least you've kind of opened my eyes to new ways of approach, because you're a lot more conservative. You really wait till you had dialogue and emails back and forth before even asking for that connection, right?
Generally speaking, I do make a lot of connections, but what I don't like to do, and I don't like to have to me, is I don't like 30 seconds after the event's over, and I get these, you're getting out to your car and you're getting a notification that, oh my gosh, I just met this person. They want to connect with me on LinkedIn. To me, that just seems a little forward. And I know people I hear people laughing about it when it happens. And so I'm like, okay, maybe that's something I ought not to do. I'm not opposed to those LinkedIn connections. I'm not opposed to doing it. I just don't want to do it within, right after the event. Let's have some more conversation. Let's not presume they want to go on a second date, so to speak.
Fair enough. So, Frank, just before we wrap this up, this was a great conversation. I've really learned a lot from this dialogue back and forth with you here. Is there any last pearls of wisdom that you've got?
Well, it will go back to where we started. The biggest mistake you're going to make is what's that?
Show up.
Yeah, show up. And there are no shortage of events. You get online, go to Meetup, and people are advertising events. But the other thing I want to say with respect to events is there are networking events everywhere. It doesn't have to be dubbed a networking event. A tailgate is a networking event. The office after hours is a networking event. Just being out with friends is a networking event. And all the things I've said here all apply there. It doesn't mean, you don't wait for the networking event to try and have a conversation with somebody and follow those guidelines.
Fantastic. Frank, this was incredibly informative. I really appreciate having this conversation with you today. There's a lot to be gleaned from these pearls of wisdom that you have. I do want to say, if you want to find your local chapter of AmSpirit, head over to AmSpirit.com, find your local chapter, get involved, and if your community doesn't have one, get in touch with this guy. This is the guy that you want to get in touch with because, as Frank mentioned, they're expanding right now across the United States. Frank, again, thank you for joining us, and to everyone who viewed us, hope there was a lot of positive takeaways for you as well.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.